Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tom Castro. I'm going to be the moderator of today's panel. We appreciate your attendance today at the LULAC session on Latinos in the media. We have 45 minutes, and so LULAC decided there would not be Q&A so that we can benefit more from the things our panelists have to say. And probably, they didn't say this, but probably at Latino events, people usually make speeches, not ask questions. So I think they wanted to eliminate that so that we could have more time for the panel. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background, then I'm going to introduce each of our panelists and ask them a question. And after that, we'll have just an overall discussion among the panelists, and you should each feel free to comment on maybe something you heard in the first part of the session, and or maybe something that hasn't come up that you'd like to say, and we'll just have a discussion about that. We have, in addition to the three panelists you see, Lillian Rodriguez. Lillian, can you hear us?
Yes,
Lillian?
I hear you.
You can. Okay. Can you all see Lillian? Okay. Hello, Lillian.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't join you today. I had a little accident, hurt an ankle, so it's a pleasure to be in the room with you virtually.
Lillian has an ankle boot and cannot travel right now. So we wanted you to hear her point of view on a very important event that happened in 2010, 2011, and so we have her today via Zoom. And Lillian, please feel free to participate once we have the general discussion. My background, the reason I think that LULAC asked me to moderate is I was a broadcaster for about 30 years. I owned mostly radio stations, a few TV stations, and bought my first TV station with a partner who was older than me when I was 25 years old. And during the entirety of this time, the industry has changed. Broadcasting and media in general has changed pretty dramatically, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. I also have served on the board of Time Warner and the Nielsen company that does the ratings for TV and radio. And I've served on various Latino and non-Latino nonprofit boards. So I'm happy to be with you, and I look forward to a spirited discussion with my friends here. We're going to start with Ana Gomez, who is to my immediate left here. Ana has now been an FCC commissioner for only about 4 months or so. She is a communications lawyer and has worked here in Washington for many years. She previously worked at the FCC itself as part of the staff, and also at something called NTIA. And those of you who were here earlier, you heard the gentleman who runs NTIA speak, and that's similar to the FCC, but not the same thing. And also she worked on Capitol Hill. Her family is from Ecuador, and Colombia. We'll get to Ecuador on the end in a moment. Her family's from Colombia, and actually as a child, she lived in Colombia. She was born here and then went to Colombia as a child and before coming back. My family is originally from Mexico, although my parents are born here, and our family has lived in California and Arizona for many generations. So we're happy and privileged that Ana would join us today. Because she is a government official, and not just a government official, she and the FCC are regulators. So they're kind of like judges, and they have to be very careful about taking public positions on issues that might come before them. So you wouldn't want a judge to say, I hate criminals, and then there's a criminal before the judge. Is that criminal going to get a fair trial? Maybe not. So Anna has to be a little bit more precise in her comments, as opposed to my two friends at the end here, who are private citizens and also from Hollywood. And so they'll probably be a little bit more outgoing, let's say. Anna most recently was a partner at the firm Wiley Ryan, one of the premier communications law firms here in Washington, D.C. And for each person, I'm going to tell you a little known fact. So if you go to the FCC website, you'll see Anna's formal bio. But what you don't know about Anna is that after she became a lawyer, she was part of a women's chorus here in Washington, so she was a singer. And they performed at the Kennedy Center as part of a production that the famous Marvin Hamlish directed. So she's not quite Hollywood like Eddie Olmos, but you'll see there's a connection. So it's a little known fact about our guest, Anna. And the question I'm going to ask Anna is, would you tell us about the role of the FCC? People may think they know about it. There's a lot of misconceptions about what it does and doesn't do in the areas, obviously, of television, radio, broadband, and any other areas you'd like to tell us about. And we're going to ask each panelist to speak for about 5 minutes, and then we'll go to the next panelist.
All right, thank you. Thank you to LULAC for having me. Thank you, Tom. I really have enjoyed our conversations. It's great to be here. I just love being what I consider mi gente. It's so nice to see your sea of faces, and I'm just delighted to be here. So I think what I would like to start out with is by talking about what the FCC does not do. The Commission does not regulate content. There is a limited exception for obscenity, which is probably what our most famous moments in history are about, but the truth is we do not regulate content. And I'd like to explain what we actually do. Every television and radio has to obtain a license from the FCC to operate. And the FCC oversight over these broadcast licensees is important but limited. At a high level, it is our job to ensure that these who are entrusted with these television and radio broadcast licenses use it to serve the public interest. And what that means is we consider the public interest in connection with license grants, renewals, transfers of control. Please don't fall asleep. But why do we do that? Our objectives are, we want to ensure that these licensees are serving the local community and that we preserve what we call a diversity of viewpoints, which is so important to maintain trust in what folks are hearing and for people to learn about their communities, about the news, about disasters, so on and so forth. The Commission also oversees ownership limits, which we were just talking about. You know, how many stations a station owner can own in a single market, which is tied to ensuring that these resources serve a diversity of viewpoints. And finally, the FCC has a role in the oversight of the provision of broadband, or access, high-speed access to internet services, which is how content is delivered over the internet. There's a big public debate right now about the Commission's role with regard to this, but we're not going to go there. But rather, let's talk about the digital divide and how it is central to accessibility and delivery of media because it impacts who can access content on the internet and the diversity of voices in storytelling because it allows creatives to share their own stories. The Latin public interest community has really done an excellent job of marshaling the data to show the economics of the media marketplace. And our community makes up almost 20% of the US population and is 25% of the population under the age of 18. And Latin representation in traditional media, film, television, and I know you guys know this, is comparatively low. And that is troubling for all the reasons that I'm sure my fellow panelists will be talking about. However, Latina participation in the online marketplace is much higher. So media access through the use of broadband and the applications that ride over it have become a game changer to our community. When the Latina community does not see themselves in traditional broadcast and traditional media, they thrive, they drive growth to other platforms like YouTube or TikTok. This audience spends 57% more time on YouTube than non-Hispanic white people. So that makes our job of closing the digital divide that much more important, to make sure that you can find voices that speak to you and meet the community where they are. One of the things that the FCC does is it administers something called the Affordable Connectivity Program. Now, you heard from Alan Davidson, Secretary Davidson, earlier from NTIA. I'm sure he talked about grant program to deploy broadband everywhere to everyone throughout the United States. Well, an important sister program to that is something called the Affordable Connectivity Program. And this is a program that the FCC administers to provide low cost or provide support to qualified recipients to pay for broadband. What that means is we provide basically support or a subsidy for the price of broadband. And some providers make it free because they price it at the same cost that we're supporting, or they make it lower cost using this subsidy program. We have 23 million households signed up to this program. And I want to talk about it today because in a couple of months, we are going to run out of funding for this. 23 million households is 1/6 of the households in the country who are suddenly going to lose their internet connectivity because we are running out of funds. The good news is there are bipartisan proposals both on the Senate and the House side to refund the program. But like I said, we know that we're running out of funds now, so we have had to halt, we've had to freeze the ability to get new applications, so qualified households can't apply for any more funding. And at some point, we're going to have to halt the program altogether if Congress doesn't refund it. So I'm really hopeful that doesn't happen. It's important because, again, like I said, the Latina population really does rely on the internet to get a lot of their content that speaks to them, but also because you need to be connected in order to participate in society and in the economy. And there are so many ways that our population in particular is entrepreneurial and creates new businesses and thinks of new ways to enter the economy that they may not have that opportunity to do because they'll no longer have access to the internet if we cannot continue supporting these households. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to bore you with what the FCC does, and I look forward to having this conversation.
Thank you. We're going to hear next from Lillian Rodriguez, who is in Atlanta, through the marvels of technology. We're going to hear next from Lillian Rodriguez, who is in Atlanta today, and through the marvels of technology, a good example of how technology makes all of our lives better, but still needs a certain role for the government to make sure that things are done in a way that benefits all the society. Lillian is able to join us, and you're able to learn from her, even though she can't travel. 10 years ago, maybe even right before the pandemic, it would not have been possible really to do a Zoom call like this. So Lillian, welcome. We appreciate you joining us, and we have a good-sized audience here. You were able to hear Anna, right, when she spoke? Lillian? Great.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I'd like to tell you a little bit about Lillian. She was the president of the Hispanic Federation, which is based in New York, but has operations primarily, I think, on the East Coast. serving a very large Latino population in the cities where they do business, and they have many local affiliates in different communities that are part of the overall Hispanic Federation. And so she played an important leadership role there. She left the Hispanic Federation to move to Atlanta to become an executive with the Coca-Cola Company, and worked in their public affairs and government relations organization, and played a very important role in something she and I are going to talk about in a moment, as the leader of a coalition of Latino national organizations to work with a media company, a very big company that many of you probably are aware of, Comcast. But before that, I'd like to tell you a little known fact about Lillian. Right out of college, she was hired by CBS. It's before she became a big shot Latina leader in America. And her job was to communicate with all the people who had pitched 60 Minutes and to give them the bad news that their story was not going to make the cut, that they were not going to be on 60 Minutes. And there would be mail that would come in from the public to people like Dan Rather, who was at the time at CBS, and on whatever the subject is, somebody didn't like his tie, they didn't like the way he covered a certain news item, and Lillian's job was to let them know, we appreciate your communication, but we'll do better next time. And for the 60 Minutes people, the bad news was you're not getting on 60 Minutes. And so that was Lillian's first job out of school and her first exposure to the media. At the end of 2009, President Obama had been in office less than a year, and Comcast, which initially was a cable company, now the biggest cable company in America, Comcast announced that they had made a deal with General Electric, which owned NBC Universal. And what GE owned was obviously the NBC network, the NBC TV stations, what in media world are called O&Os, the stations they actually owned as opposed to their affiliates. They owned the Universal theme parks. They owned a movie studio, and now Comcast wanted to buy them. It's a big deal, and it would give Comcast, if it went through, really involvement in most of the media sector, not radio, but pretty much everything else. They made movies, they made TV shows, they own TV stations, they have theme parks, they have cable systems. It would become, if the deal went through, a very, very large company, probably one of the top 25 in the United States in terms of size, in terms of revenue. And so this deal needed the FCC's approval, and it needed the Department of Justice's approval. And Lillian, at the time, was besides being the president of the Hispanic Federation, which was her day job, she was the chair of an organization called NHLA, which consists of about 30 some odd Latino national organizations. And they have a coalition, and they advocate on behalf of the Latino community. Lillian happened to be the chair. They rotate the chair position among the different nonprofits. When this deal came down, Lillian was chair, and she organized the effort to negotiate with Comcast on behalf of the Latino community to try to require them, not through the government, but through a direct relationship between Latino organizations and this private sector business, to have them make commitments about what you see in front of the camera, the people who work behind the camera, the procurement, the money they spend with businesses, their philanthropic dollars, a whole range of things. So Lillian, although she used to turn down people who were trying to get on 60 Minutes, really had not worked in the media business much. She was a community leader. And so Lillian, will you tell us why you personally jumped into this as somebody who had not spent your career in the media, and not only why you did it, why it was important, the approach that you used, and what the outcome was at the time, and then looking back now, that's been 13 years or so. The deal finally was approved a year later in 2011. So Lillian?
Yeah, no, so thank you so much for the opportunity to be there, and I want to just thank LULAC and Tom for the invitation, and obviously, I'm sorry I'm not there to see this great audience and be with the other panelists. So the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, which was the organization that I was chairing at that time when the deal between Comcast and NBC Universal was first underway, we had some, outstanding, organizations that were focused on Latino media. We had the National Hispanic Foundation for the Arts, we had the National Hispanic Media Coalition, and we also had NALIP, which was Latino Independent Producers, who were members of NHLA. And part of the impetus for us to get involved, but also for me personally to take it on as a passion project, was I had been involved in earlier years in a bit of a conversation with Nielsen, and we had developed a coalition. It was a multicultural coalition that involved the Latino community. The Federation was kind of leading on that, African American and Asians. And it was when Nielsen went from the diaries to the people meters, and ratings were dropping and they were plummeting, and there was a question about why, what level of investment was being made by Nielsen at that time, how were they educating or taking families from a diary system to sort of these, more electronic people meters, and then the huge ripple effect, right, that it had on people that were, obviously in front of the camera, but also behind the camera, right? So the whole stream around, media and content creation, and every industry has a huge ecosystem. So when the opportunity came to be engaged and to be in conversations with Comcast around this particular merger, we were very eager to better understand the impact of it on Latinos because of the Nielsen experience, but more important than that, because we thought it was a really big opportunity to drill in on those key areas. And Tom, you kind of mentioned some of them, so I'll just mention them very high level, because we really went in wanting an MOU, and that's what we were negotiating. We were negotiating a memorandum of, or MOA, some people call MOU, a memorandum of understanding with Comcast, and there were parallel efforts, with other communities, but it was really important because we were interested in looking at governance and having a Latino serve on the Comcast board. We were interested in programming and making sure that Comcast would create an opportunity to have, channels that would very much feature, content that was Latino driven or focused on bilingualism. We also had the issue of community and reinvestment. What was Comcast doing for the Latino community, and what were their areas of interest, and how were they giving back to the community? Unlike other industries, if you recall, we're going back, over a decade, there was the issue of subscribership, right? So if you were a channel and you were on cable, were you getting on the basic service, which means you had a much broader economic reach, and then the other, sort of pillar was the pillar around, workforce development for Latinos and in all of the, company properties. So that was our focus. Those were, 5 pillars that we were very much focused on, and that's the work that we wanted to embed into the MOU. And then after that, they actually created these councils, like a Latino council, a council for the Black African American community, Asians, and so forth. to be able to really do the work and monitor it. The reason it was so important to us was, people look at sort of national advocacy organizations, and I worked in the sector for over 16 years and serve on boards now, and it's always like, well, what does your organization do? Are you focused on immigration? Are you focused on education? Are you focused on environmental self-sufficiency, citizenship, immigration, healthcare? There are a myriad of issues that these amazing organizations focus on. And when we started looking at the merger, they were like, well, why are you doing this? This is business. It was almost like it's business and it exists at a different level that maybe your organizations are not sophisticated enough to engage in, or you don't understand, how these companies work. Well, yeah, we didn't understand 100%, but we could learn. We could learn how the industries work, and obviously we had people who had worked in the industry and nonprofits that were focused that understood it very, very well, national groups. But in addition to that, it's really looking at any industry and saying, what are the economic drivers behind this industry, and how is it impacting our community? And how does it impact not only representation, which was so critically important to us, or the economics of, the writers and producers and actors and film crews and customers and people who were just catering, and every other service that is so critically important in this industry. And there is a reason why people give tax credits and really move very aggressively to be able to have filming and production within their states or within their cities, because these are economic drivers. And we wanted to make sure that as you think about the industry, not only are Latinos represented in the industry, but that economy is also benefiting our community. So you have content, but you have those other parts. So I just want to emphasize that, because I think that was really important. And it was, we believe, I believe, as I look back, we got a good result. We were able to see the changes. Comcast was responsive. There's no silver bullet on anything that you do, or any effort or any initiative that you take on, but you take it on, with good faith. And I think that they did work with the community and worked with our organizations and with NHLA in good faith, and we saw good results. But we were building on sort of the work and the interest and the synergies that had come before us, but also we built a big tent. So we did have support from folks in industry who are working in industry. We did have support from the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. I mentioned to Tom that, there was a pivotal conversation that I had. It involved, he's Secretary of HHS now, but he was in Congress then, and he was in leadership in CHC. And, Secretary Becerra, Congressman at that time, called me up and said to me, Lillian, I know you're working with this with the other groups. By the way, LULAC was also at the table. Their executive director was a member of the negotiating team. And he says to me, if you say to me that we're good, and that we've reached a point where, we've gotten the results we want in negotiating with the company, and we don't need to fight or be any more assertive, then I'm going to respect what you say to me. And when someone throws down a gauntlet like that, what was my response? Let me go back to the table and look at some stuff again. And so that was a pivotal moment in terms of driving some of the work around subscriberships for Latino-owned, content providers, as well as sort of the programming, and Robert Rodriguez getting, a channel. That's what I would call it. I'm old enough to think of it still as, a channel, streaming service. And then, of course, the other one at that time was Baby First, which is bilingual and still, benefits children. But I'm going to end on that note, Tom, because I think I'm past my 5 minutes.
That's great. Thank you. Will you just close the circle for the benefit of our our audience. So you're saying that a combination of congressional political power represented by then Congressman Becerra, and the national Latino organizations, 30 some odd, including LULAC, by working together, you were able to get Comcast to sign a memorandum of understanding, agree to put a Latino or Latina on their board of directors, create some channels owned by Latinos, and do various other things. And this was about 13 years ago.
Yeah, we saw tremendous growth in their community reinvestment. We saw a Latino get appointed to their board of directors. We saw some very specific Latino content that was going to go in. It was, you know, they actually awarded, that was how Baby First started, which is still on you know, streams. And we also, Robert Rodriguez, and then we also worked with the private sector. I was open, and we were open to conversations with the private sector where people would educate us on this is why this is important. And then, of course, you know, we were working, you know, looking at, you know, other multicultural communities and you know, sort of saying, okay, this is what we're looking at, what are you looking at? So that we had some synergies across the various communities, because at the end of the day, we were all fighting for the same thing, was, you know, to make the company more responsive to the needs of communities of color. And we wanted to do it with strategies of being inside and outside, right? So it was quite a labor of love, but, you know, I feel that I learned a lot about the industry, and it's one of the things that probably in my career, I am very proud of, that we were able to sit at that table and be able to negotiate that with Comcast and sign it and pen it. And I never remember, they're like, are you gonna sign it? And it was my daughter's high school graduation. I'm like, it's my daughter's graduating today, but yes, I will sign it as soon as I come back from the graduation, you know? I mean, this is the work of the community. This is the way we have to work together. We have to build the biggest, strongest tent to be able to sort of get the kind of results that we want.
That's great, thank you. And if you're asking yourself, well, why was this? Why was this giant company, Comcast, negotiating with Lillian and her team? They wanted to get their deal approved. And the FCC and Justice Department have to approve these deals. The Congress does not, but the Congress influences, especially if you're from the same party as the White House. You have some say, not formally, but you call people and you tell them, here's the problem, here's why you should approve or should not. And so Lillian and her group were holding up the approval. And it took a year before this company got their deal approved. So thank you again, Lillian. Rafa, you're up next, and then we'll go to Eddie. Rafa Agustin came to the U.S. at age 7 with his family from Ecuador. So you've heard from somebody from Colombia, or their family, me, Mexico, Lillian, Puerto Rico. Now we're going to go south to Ecuador. And the Agustin family came to Los Angeles when Rafa was 7. He became a TV and film writer. Probably you all watched Ugly Betty, the English version.
Jane the Virgin.
Jane the Virgin.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jane the Virgin, her cousin, Betty's cousin. So Jane the Virgin, he was one of the writers of that TV show. He's worked in Hollywood for some years. He's going to tell us a little bit about his point of view there. And he was, while he was writing, he was also the CEO for a while of the Latino Film Institute, which Eddie Olmos was the founder of. And Rafa ran the day-to-day program, which included a program in the schools of California to work with kids, usually 4th grade through high school, to expose them to the media industry. And they do other great things. They have a Latino Film Festival, for example. What you may not know about Rafa, if you go on the internet and you search Rafa Agustin is that he wrote a book recently called, I think I got this right, Illegally Yours? Illegally Yours, because he was undocumented for many years after his family came to the United States. And Netflix is considering doing, it would be a series or a show? A series.
Don't clap. I've sold 4 shows. It's really hard to get things to series, so it might die in development hell like everything else.
Okay, so you didn't know that about Rafa before. Aren't you glad you came today? You learn about all these things. So Rafa, what can government do within the bounds of what's appropriate for government to do to change the situation of Latinos in the media? And Eddie will give us, historical perspective. But what can government do? What can it not do in your experience?
Well, let me begin by saying that in academia, there's something known as symbolic annihilation. And symbolic annihilation is when a group of people are excluded or underrepresented in mass media. Why is that important? I never thought much about symbolic annihilation until the mass murder of El Paso, Texas, when a mass murderer said that he killed innocent Americans because he saw them as illegal or invaders or foreigners. That's the problem of symbolic annihilation, that people don't see us as American. And when we talk about what's going on in Hollywood, the big problem is that non-Hispanics don't see Latino stories as American stories. That is what we're trying to overcome. Like there was a lot of talk about, do you remember when In the Heights came out a few years back? Everyone was saying, all the press was saying, Latinos didn't show up. Latinos didn't come watch that. But it's false, because the data all shows that Latinos over-index in that film. You know who didn't show up? Everyone else. That's what we're trying to fight. So when you see big successes like a Coco or Encanto, it's because other communities come out and say, hey, I feel seen, I feel like I'm part of that story. Yeah, you asked me what I feel the government can do. The truth is, government has no power over Hollywood except when there are mergers. So like we heard earlier, the only times that we can actually fight is when companies are trying to merge. That's when we can make our demands, because if we try to make our demands after that, we don't matter anymore. I actually believe, and I wish there was an FCC chair sitting here with us, I really do believe that it's going to take us to tie the film tax credits and tax incentives of every state to diversity requirements. That's the only way we're gonna force Hollywood to make change. I mean, look what the Oscars did post Oscars So White. They realized they had to make a change. They changed voting regulation. They diversified the membership, and nothing happened. So then they said, you know what? The only way you qualify for an Oscar is if you meet this threshold of diversity in your productions. All of a sudden, minorities started getting hired in Hollywood. You have to put it in the legislation, and you have to hit them in their pockets for them to actually make a change. And I'm sorry, it's been a long conversation. The last thing I wanted to say was we make the wrong argument to Hollywood when we're saying morally you should invest in diversity, morally you should do what's right for America. They don't care about that. We just have to make the economic argument. You are leaving way too much money on the table when you don't invest in our stories, when you don't give the audiences in the community the stories that they want to see. And we have a few cases where some films came out and over-indexed, like I think about that Marvel movie, Doctor Strange 2, when they actually cast a Latina superhero. That movie over-indexed with our community like you wouldn't believe, and that grows so much money. So when you actually invest in our community, it's great for your bottom line. Those are the arguments we need to be making.
Thank you, Rafa. I got the 5-minute signal, so we're not going to have a discussion, but we are going to hear from Eddie Olmos. And I would just note that most of the data says that Commissioner Gomez told us we're almost 20% of the population, 25% of the young people. Not surprisingly, most people believe Latinos are at least 25% of Hollywood's box office, if not more. So we over-index at the box office. But despite that, Hollywood still doesn't really see us as a key part of their business model. Eddie Olmos needs no introduction from me or any of us, but I will highlight a few things. Eddie has been an actor, director, producer, still very active in Hollywood. He's really a Latino who has been a pioneer in Hollywood. We remember him from Stand and Deliver, for which he was nominated for an Academy Award, the only US-born Latino ever nominated for an Academy Award. We remember him from Miami Vice on television, and for which he won an Emmy, I believe. And some of us saw him on the Broadway and Los Angeles stage in the lead role of Zoot Suit, which is a fantastic play and later made into a movie. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, he's a founder of the Latino Film Institute, which does many things and very active in the community as a matter of passion. Some of you who are old enough remember that when the disturbances happened in Los Angeles in the early 90s, which was a very scary thing for the city. The city was up in flames. When things died down, Eddie went to the streets with a broom to clean up the city and inspired others to join him in that effort. The fun thing you don't know about Eddie, though, is that before he was an actor, he was a rock and roll singer. So on the Sunset Strip in Hollywood, you could find in the 60s, late 60s, a young Eddie Olmos singing rock and roll songs. He eventually decided to become an actor. His first role, to give you some idea of Hollywood, he was cast as a, quote, junkie in the bathroom. He was not named Jose or Joe. He's just junkie in the bathroom. So when the credits rolled, he was not credited. Probably a good thing. His second, he kind of started moving up the food chain. That was in 1974. In 1975, he was cast as Chicano #1. Not Jose or Joe or Billy, just Chicano #1. But he was credited. So that was 1975. So Eddie, that was almost 50 years ago. Where do we stand today, and what words of wisdom do you have for us about Latinos in Hollywood? They're giving me the 3-minute signal. I'll give you 5.
Thank you.
Since they can't take this
Let
away
me just
from us.
thank you, Tommy, for being here and doing this with us. And thank you, Lillian, to Ana, and to Rafael for coming in, because this is a very important matter. It really is, like Rafael said so eloquently. I think we're well over 22% of the population in this country, all included, with everyone. And yes, we are over 25% under the age of 18, which is monumental. That's like we're definitely moving in a direction that is unstoppable. And therefore, the number one thing that has been the biggest issue with us being able to express ourselves and really use the mediums, all mediums, not just, the audiovisual event, which is the most powerful medium the human has ever created in the history of humankind, more than the radio, more than painting, more than dancing, live performances. Nothing attacks the subconscious mind more than the audiovisual event. And it attacks it right inside. It goes in there like in a computer. It goes in. If you're smart and you can have a high IQ, you can actually recall it and make it come back, like 10 years from now or 20 years from now. They call it, your memory. The reason that we don't really get an opportunity, and this is very important, guys, you have to face it, okay? It's fear. Fear is the one thing that has stopped us the most with other cultures accepting us. They're so afraid of us, it's ridiculous. I say that with a lot of understanding. Believe me when I tell you, the reason the doors don't swing wide open because they know if they let us in, we're going to take over the ballpark. It's a given. I mean, as it is, population-wise, forget it. Within 25, 30 years, we will be the largest population in this country. And that is not going to happen in this country, they say. They can't stop it. They can't. So what do? They minimize our abilities to be able to move forward. And then with the lack of us being able to express ourselves and become part of the huge understanding of this beautiful country, which is, I mean, this is one of the most diverse countries in the planet. I know we speak every language on the planet. I know we do in this country. But I will tell you, the future lies in your hands, especially those of you that are under the age of 25. You're the ones that we really have to make sure that you understand this and that you, in turn, become even more understanding and give of yourself so that other people can see us for who we are. And I made my whole life and career off of the things that I've chosen to do. And, you know, Tommy was mentioning the very first things that I did when because I had to get a SAG card. I had to be in the union. You couldn't get in the union unless you had a speaking role, and you couldn't get a speaking role unless you were in the union. So that's a catch-22. It's very difficult to get into the union. So I say to you, all of you, and as you sit here, and we only have a few minutes, but just remember one thing. We are the future. We're the most powerful single culture in the United States of America, bar none. And I'm talking about science, engineering, medicine, you know, sports, you know, everything that we touch. We have young people who discipline themselves, like I said earlier today in the 9 o'clock first session, I said it, you know, they discipline themselves to be the best that they could be. Not better than somebody else. Don't ever try to be better than somebody else. Ever. You'll lose. Because there's always going to be somebody better than you. Always. So that you always say, oh, I'm not the best. Don't even go there. Your intention comes out in the content. The choices that you make will indicate to people why you're doing what you're doing. So get your sense of balance in. Spiritually center yourself. And I'm not talking religion. I'm talking about spirituality, the center of who you are as a human being. And remember one thing. There is only one race. The human race, period. There's no African race, there's no Caucasian race, there's no Asian race, indigenous race, Latino race. No, there's only one race. We started using the word race as a cultural determinant back in 1471 when the French decided to call the other, they're a different race than us. They used the word. That's unbelievable. We're all human beings, you know, whether we be black, white, brown, yellow, red, who cares what culturally we are? I mean, we're just human, all of us. And so we have to end up understanding. And we have to understand that we start in Africa. Don't ever forget your heritage. Don't ever forget the fact that one single thing, we didn't come from Norway. Humanity didn't start in, you know, Mexico. The humanity started in Africa. It's been proven time and time and time again. And yet we, as Latinos, have a hard time with that. We as indigenous people in this country have even a harder time with it. And the Asian, oh, forget it. They don't think they have any African blood in them. Sorry, man, you do, guys. Your structure started there. So you got to look at each other as we're the same family. We're the same people, whether they be from Germany, Norway, Russia, whether they be from Africa, whether they be from South America, Mexico, whether they be from France, wherever, Germany. It doesn't matter where they're from. We're all the same human species, and we're all one race. So with that, I say to you, please, the future is in our hands. Let's make it one that is unbelievable. Let's us be the uniting factor of the human race. That's what Latino Film Institute is. It's become the united factor for the advancement of education for our children. And it's just starting. We've only been doing it for like 26 years. We're just starting. And in the last 10 years, we've exploded on the scene. And maybe we'll get participation like from different organizations like the FCC or like LULAC, not with funding. I don't need their money. I need them to talk about it. I need them to say, hey, have you ever heard about this? Have you ever heard about Latino Film Institute? You should check it out. They have this incredible situation going on. Use the word Latino because we don't get credit for anything. And we've done a lot in this country. And I'm inclusive with that word, okay? There's a lot of us. You know, we come from South America. We come from Iberoamerica is us. So let's please understand, you guys. You got it. You have the strength and the power to be the best that you can be.
Thank you, Eddie.
Do it.
Lillian, thank you for making the special effort to join us via Zoom. Commissioner Gomez, we appreciate you being here. Eddie, Rafa, and thanks to all of you and to LULAC for pulling the conference together. I think there's another panel coming up, and we appreciate even our timekeeper. We went a little past, but we said 4, so we're 7 minutes over. So thank you very much.